Good morning, I'm Mups Mapunyane, your host for today's live stream at the second annual event for Goalkeepers. We're here at the Jazz Lincoln Center in New York, and we can't wait to get this incredible event going. I'm really excited about it because it's an event that brings together all the world's, well, a lot of the world's best goalkeepers, people who are sticking to their global goals and making a difference in their own respective ways with different organizations from around the world. Personally, my focus is SDG 4, which is quality education. I have a passion for youth and education, and I personally got involved with Goalkeepers through my organization bursarynetwork.com, which is a crowdfunding website for bursaries in South Africa. And what it really does is provide students or prospective students in South Africa who are trying to get access to funding with some sort of funding for university, and it's something that really drives my passion. Of course, Goalkeepers is an organization that is founded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they have been doing some sensational work, and they bring together the world's leaders and innovators and make sure that they can make some sort of a difference in fighting inequality as well as ending world poverty. At the event today, we have an incredible lineup. We've got some incredible speakers, and we're going to have people on the main stage, such as President Emmanuel Macron, King Kaka, the performer or musician from Kenya. There's also going to be the Chief Innovation Officer from Sierra Leone, or the Sierra Leone government, being David Senge. We're also going to be hearing from Loyiso Madinga, who's South African, one of the biggest South African comedians, and also many more, activist and founder of She Says, Trisha Shetty. I'll be here all day speaking to the different performers and different goalkeepers. I really want you to help me get that conversation going with them. First up, I'm going to be speaking to DJ Switch Ghana, who's actually playing in the background right now, an amazing 10-year-old with an incredible story. I'll also be speaking to Max Rosa, as well as Jasmine Lau, and many more, together with Hilda Mora in their first section. So please, if you have any questions for them, please put them in the comments right here on Facebook or on Twitter. Use the hashtag Goalkeepers2018. But first up, we're just about to get going, and we're going to be hearing on the main stage from President of France, Emmanuel Macron. So stay tuned.
Let's go. There's so much hatred, war and poverty. knows who's coming up, and the world is in their hands. When you teach the children, teach them the very best you can. Oh, the world won't get no better. Just let it be. Na 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 na. The world won't get no better. We gotta change it, yeah. Just you and me. Yeah, yeah. Wake up all the darkness, make the old people well. They're the ones who suffer and who catch all the hell. They don't ask so very long before the judgment day. So won't you make them happy before they pass away? Wake up all the builders, time to build a new land. I know we can do it if we all lend a hand. The only thing we have to do is put it in our mind, and everything will work out. They do it all the time. Yeah. The world won't get no better if we just let it be. Na, 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 na. The world won't get no better. We gotta change it, yeah. Just you and me. Wake up, everybody, wake up. Now wake up, everybody, wake up, wake up. Wake up, everybody, wake up. Now wake up, everybody, wake up, wake up. Wake up, everybody, wake up. Now wake up, everybody, wake up, wake up. Wake up, everybody, wake up. Now wake up, everybody, wake up. Now wake up.
Goalkeepers, please welcome our host, Bill and Melinda Gates.
Well, welcome everyone to Goalkeepers. It's great to be back for year 2 and to see so many amazing goalkeepers in the audience. We hope you'll have an amazing day. Melinda and I will be back for our own session shortly, but first we'd like to welcome another goalkeeper to the stage. Since taking office, President Emmanuel Macron has made a point of spending time in Africa. On each trip, he's placed a special focus on Africa's young people, and for good reason. African youth are the fastest growing generation in the world. France's future and the world's depends on the well-being of these young people. President Macron understands this, and it's why under his leadership, France continues to commit to fighting poverty and disease and to ensuring that young people have opportunities to live the healthy and productive lives they dream of.
President Macron has declared that gender equality to be the great cause of his presidency. As he puts it, gender equality is an issue that has no borders. Investing in women and girls is one of the best things we can do to create the future that we all aspire to. When leaders like President Macron put women and girls at the heart of their agendas, it sends a really important signal to other leaders. And it sends an important signal to the world. Bill and I are very glad he's here today. Please help us in welcoming President Macron. You brought your own special guest.
Hello everybody. She wanted to come on stage with me without any question. This is the deal. So I will take the questions and she will be on stage. You are 10 and live in Ghana. It's not a question, it was just an affirmation. Look, I just want to thank both of you, Bill and Melinda, for your leadership. Not just the 7th, but your constant leadership and the first achievement. And I think it's very important, and that's why I wanted to join you for this Goalkeepers. I'm sorry I will not sing. I'm not Ed Sheeran, and I know you had a great time yesterday evening with him. I wanted to congratulate you for precisely your words, and we just met with the different goalkeepers. And because I do share, I would say, the method and the philosophy you promote. The method, it's about pragmatism, accountability, and people. Why? Because we very often speak about multilateralism, common goods, what we have to do for the planet. But very often we just have speeches without delivering. As former business leaders, you're obsessed by delivering. I'm obsessed as well by that. And I think, for me, the main interest of this Goalkeepers initiative and the new way to promote multilateralism is precisely about accountability and concrete results. We know that we have the Agenda 2030, we have the SDG and so on. It's impossible to say next year we will deliver everything. Impossible. But if we just have speeches every year without assessing what we do and not do, without focusing on successes, first results, and weaknesses and failures, we will never progress. And I think this method is a very good one. I try to do the same with the One Planet Summit and the climate action. So accountability and pragmatism. And in terms of method, people. What we need today is leaders. Leaders. We all agree about that. I see one here and some other NGOs and activists of this topic. Speaking about figures, objectives, and so on is good. Having reports, I mean, is very fine. You need people to implement, but you need people to inspire, to push people to move, and to trigger big changes in our way to work, consume, decide, and so on. It means we need leaders. And that's why the Goalkeepers initiative is creating a sort of broad and open club of talents, inspired people, dedicated to change everything. To push politicians, to criticize what we do in our governments, in our countries, which is very important. And that's why this method, for me, is extremely fertile and promising. In terms of objective, and where I'm here, and where I do believe that we have a lot of things in common and a common agenda. Obviously, we have our global agenda and the Agenda 2030 and our SDGs. And I want us to do much more. Why? Because I do believe in multilateralism. I do believe in our ability to deliver following this agenda. I committed myself, and for France, we will go from 10 billion to 15 billion by 2022 a year in terms of development aid. And because this mobilization is for governments, for international agencies, for private players and NGOs. I have three main challenges I'm very attached to. The first one is obviously climate. We preserved the Paris Agreement, whatever some decisions were one year ago. And I think our reaction precisely is this common gathering and the fact we decided to focus on results started to work. We are lagging behind. We are not delivering following the line of Paris Agreement. We are late. And the first consequences of all these climate changes are here. Everything is in a big time of acceleration. But last year, with the One Planet Summit, we had very first commitments from the finance side. We gathered a few months ago the sovereign funds, and they committed now to invest much more on climate. And what we have to do, and we will have this afternoon the second summit, and Bill will be here, I know that, and thanks for your presence and your commitment, both of you. But we have to shift 1/3 of the global finance, the global asset managers and so on, from the day-to-day business to the climate business. This is pretty much the objective. We're not speaking about additional new big figures we will never deliver. But it's just to say, we'll live in the same planet, look at the situation, look at the hurricanes, look at the new desert, look at the new poverty created by climate change. Okay, you have to invest. It's good for the planet, but it's good for you as well. We will create this big shift, and 1/3 of this overall business is reachable, and that's one of the critical action. On top of that, I will put all our development aid under a sort of Paris Agreement compliance, with 100% of our development being totally compliant with Paris Agreement, and I think all the different countries of the United Nations should do the same. We have a lot of other initiatives on climate we will take and announce this afternoon, but I do believe in these concrete milestones. We took 12 pledges and commitments, and we will see where we are and what we have to add. Second is education. Education is absolutely key. From now to 2030, we will have more than 600 million children supposed to go to school without a solution today. And 444 million of them are in Africa. This is a big question. Because if we don't educate them, if we don't teach them, but it's not just about teaching them, it's providing, obviously, math, languages, skills, but values, openness. Which kind of world will we prepare for ourselves and our children? For sure, we will leave the floor to crazy people to educate them, or we will leave the floor to nothing, which means we will create new poor people, we will create fanaticism, obscurantism in a lot of countries. That's why education is absolutely critical, and that's why with President Macky Sall, and thanks to your commitments as well, we launched this global partnership for education and the replenishment of this global partnership with $2.5 billion commitment getting beginning of this year, with a very strong focus on Africa and especially on young girls. Why? Because the critical issue in terms of equality, opportunities, demography, because it's one of the key points of your report in Africa, is about girl education. 63% of non-educated adults today are women. That's the deep root of the gender inequalities. One of the critical issues we have regarding the African demography is the fact that this is not a chosen fertility. I always say, please present me the lady who decided, being perfectly educated, to have 7, 8, 9 children. Please present me the young girl who decided to leave school at 10 in order to be married at 12. And this is not teaching African people from New York. This is a pure bullshit to say that. A lot of African leaders today now dare to have this kind of speech. This is just because a lot of girls were not properly educated. Because people de facto in these countries, but here as well, decided that the rights of these girls were not exactly the same as the rights of the young man, which is unacceptable. I'm fine with a lady having 7, 8 children if this is her choice after education. This is not the case today. That's why for me education is the main answer. First, to avoid the worst. Second, to maximize opportunities in African countries and in the rest of the world. Third, to properly monitor demography, because it will be a chosen demography. My third fight is about health. And I have to say that with Bill and Melinda, we had a lot of discussions about this issue, and this is very complementary with education, mind and body. And this is what we do believe in. You have investment in human capital, education on one side, and health on the other side. That's why I accepted, and we will organize in 2019, the replenishment of the Global Fund for AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, because I think that's a very important focus. And we need a global commitment for this topic, especially for Africa as well, but all our societies. But because as well, health is a critical point for mother as well, for children in a lot of poor societies. So we will focus a large part of our development aid on health, but we will put a strong commitment on this topic as well. Climate, education, health are for me the three pillars of our fight against poverty. And the three pillars of our fight in order to build this new world and to address one of the main roots of the imbalances of our current environment, inequalities. Yesterday, I delivered a speech at the United Nations precisely about this topic to explain that the French presidency for the G7 will be focused on inequalities. And the three challenges have to be the core of this G7. We need a very strong commitment of a lot of countries in order to be much more committed to have concrete results on these three fights. Because it's how to shape our current world, but it's how not just to preserve, but to build the future opportunities of our world and the upcoming generations. So thanks very much. I'm not a word of, as a global keepers, I would love to be with this young generation who will push us to do much more. But I think what you do, Bill and Melinda, is a very important initiative, and I wanted to thank you for your commitment, for your initiatives, and we will do our part of the same job. So thanks very much.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Incredible. Just
No,
great.
no. Thanks to you. Thanks to you. What do you want me to sit down?
How about there?
Yeah.
So Bill and I thought we'd do maybe just a few questions. And your obvious, I think, to everyone in the room, passion for these issues, but also your leadership on them. I mean, the way you're lining up your agenda, your foreign aid. One of the questions I have, because we have many goalkeepers in the room today, younger people who are the generation that will keep this all moving forward once we're older, right? The question for you is, you've been to the Sahel a lot since your presidency. And I know you spoke at the University of Burkina Faso. What is your message to the youth?
Look, as a French president speaking to the African youth, you always have to get rid of the past, I would say. So it was my first message when I went to Ouagadougou, and to say, let's try to reset the relationship and build new opportunities. And it's just speaking about the future. And I told them, you are in a country, and it's true for a lot of African countries, where, I mean, it's dependent between the different countries, but 60 to 70% are under 35. So your challenges are not the past challenges and the past questions. Your challenges are about how to build a country, how to deal with climate change and all the, precisely the consequences on Sahel and Lac Chad region. I mean, you have the direct impact of climate change because it's harder and harder, for instance, to become a farmer and have resources. And how to build together this future. Today, we have the biggest youth ever on the world. you have 1.8 billion people under 30. It never happened. And the large majority of this youth is African. So for me, my speech was focused on saying, look at the future. The future de facto is yours. This future is not to be built with the representation and the mistakes of the past. And to be very straightforward, it means the future of an African young is not to leave Africa. The future of an African young people is not to hope to become like a European and American of the 80s. It's to become an African of the 21st century. I.e. not to develop the past business and the old businesses, but how to leapfrog in a certain way and develop new innovations, new way to proceed, green businesses, decentralized businesses, and build new opportunities. And that's my deep conviction. It's not a question of aid, it's not a question of development, because this word has sometimes, this is our word to speak about all this money. This is a question on, I mean, let's build your future. It's yours. I'm not the one to decide what will be good for a young girl or a young man in Ouagadougou or in Lagos. This is him to decide. This is just my point. And I think this is a big change in terms of mindset because it's feasible. You know, I always take this comparison, but 20 years ago, a lot of people said, okay, we have to develop telco in Africa. It's not so far from your past business. So we will build new grids, big networks like we did in the US, in Europe. We will make, I mean, big stuff. But the mobile arrived. But look at Africa. You have just mobiles everywhere. In a lot of countries without landlines. And mobile phone works very well. You have mobile payment in a lot of countries. Much more developed than in a lot of countries in Europe and so on. Why? Because you had entrepreneurs and people deciding not to try just to bridge the gap with the other countries, but to build their own model and to say, okay, it's more adapted to my country, my model, what I have to do, what I believe in. And they did it. And for me, that's exactly what we have to do in a lot of sectors. On climate change, Africa has to become leaders in terms of solar energy, wind, decentralized energy, and so on. And we have tremendous initiatives in that direction, the Solar Mamas and a lot of initiatives like that. So it was my speech, and that's my inspiration when I speak to a young African.
That's great.
One last question before you have to go to the Security Council.
With your goalkeeper.
Next year, next year, in addition to your gracious hosting of the Global Fund replenishment, you also have the presidency of the G7. And I'm curious how you think about the message and the prioritization of the issues that you'll be taking up there, including issues like gender equality.
At the G7? Mm-hmm. Look, for me, the G7 indeed will be an occasion to try to build these new forums we need for multilateralism. We have a crisis of multilateralism, be clear. In terms of delivery, because we are much more divided, and because it could be a sort of vicious circles. Because those who doubt multilateralism are blocking it, and they can say, look, it doesn't deliver, it's useless. So we have now to build a sort of group of like-minded and build new fora in order to push our topics. For me, the new G7 has to be fully dedicated in terms of building and reshaping this multilateralism. What does it mean? On climate, I want to gather the 7 members of the club. But I think it's useful to have China around the table as well, and some other big powers, because China is more and more committed on climate change. They decided to have a carbon pricing and a carbon market. So I think we can have much more results if we have this sort of special relation on climate with China and India, by the way, and solar energy. We will speak about inequalities. It will be very useful to have a special relation with some key African countries. So my point is not to have just an outreach for a few hours at the G7, but to address gender equality, poverty, education, with some African countries and the African Union, which are totally committed to these issues. Senegal is very committed. Ethiopia is doing a great job moving into that direction. And you have some others, and African Union is a critical partner to do so. And I want us to follow this line, not just to have a communiqué with good words, or sometimes to have a communiqué to say, we agree to disagree on obvious topics, but to say, I mean, let's go as far as we can on climate, on education, poverty, health, and the G7 should be the sort of forefront of the ambitious countries on these topics. So that's how I want to conceive it. So that's why I want to open the club topic by topic to some others to be sure that we maximize the impact. And gender equality was a very strong commitment, and you had a very great role, Melinda, in the G7 chaired by Prime Minister Trudeau. And I think I want us to follow up on that. And I think in a lot of countries today, even in Europe, gender equality, rights of women to choose for herself is being challenged or refused. So this question now has to come back at the top of the list and has to be addressed precisely at the G7 agenda with a lot of other countries. And obviously, we will have a big session on health right after the global fund, I mean, in the context of the global fund replenishment, because AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, I mean, remain very important topics for a lot of countries, and you're very much involved in that.
Well, thank you so much for, most importantly, your leadership, but also for being here with Goalkeepers. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Keep pushing.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, Goalkeepers. I'm Nancy Kachingira.
And I'm Savannah Sellers.
Right, we'll just let you get your seats really quickly, because we're here to keep things moving and to be your guides through what's going to be a packed but extremely enjoyable day.
But first, it's our job to thank President Macron, Bill and Melinda Gates, the coolest 10-year-old on the planet. Am I right, DJ Switchkana? And goalkeeper favorites Naturally 7 for what was a spectacular start.
I was thinking, when I grow up, I want to be like
Yeah,
DJ
seriously.
Well, after last night's celebration, today is really about organizing and galvanizing. It's about learning how to make progress happen, preparing to hold leaders to account. It's about us truly becoming goalkeepers. And we're winning already. Congratulations for getting here on time. Through the Manhattan traffic during Unga Week. That is an achievement. This is going to be a good day. And what's more, it's being live streamed as we speak, so you can say hi to the goalkeepers watching around the world.
You might be wondering, why am I here? How did they find me? You might be thinking, I don't know anyone here, or you might know everyone here and think that you've heard it all. By the end of the day, no matter what, this should all make sense. You'll be inspired by what, and that will surprise you. You'll get a contact that was exactly what you needed. Or maybe 2 weeks from now, after this is all sunk in, you'll send an email to a connection you made, and you'll make more impact and more change than you even knew could happen. Let's be real about this. Any of you probably could have been on this stage. So this isn't meant to be a day at all where we're just talking to you. The presentations are meant to touch on a broad number of subjects to try and hit any questions that a number of you may have. But this afternoon, please raise your hands, stand up, join in, whatever. You're as much a part of today as anyone.
Absolutely. Now, at the heart of what today is about are the 17 global goals that are behind us now, and the data which guides our approach to making them happen. But who's actually here in the room today? Who are we goalkeepers?
Well, to help us find out, we thought we'd do a little data dive of our own on you guys.
First up, we discovered that the majority of goalkeepers here today are women. Yeah.
And youth, which will play a big part in what's coming up later, is very much in the room as well, with a quarter of us being under 30.
And this is truly, all the over 30s are clapping. This is truly a global group as well. We've got 52 countries represented in the room right now.
Incredible. And amazingly, 2 of you have won coveted awards just within the last 24 hours. Stand up, Dismas and Amica, I believe you're here. You are fully deserving of another round of applause. You guys were incredible last night.
Fantastic. What an incredible night that was.
It really was. I teared up like way too many times. We're also seeing that 7 people are worried that you haven't put your phones on silent. You know who you are. Take care of that now. What's for certain, though, is that everyone in the room is a goalkeeper and that today will be unforgettable.
Certainly will. But before we jump in, it's worth just briefly taking a look back. As an important part of Goalkeepers, we announced 4 accelerators last year. Now, each accelerator is a sort of super partnership that's aimed at catalyzing solutions and taking the smart steps that are needed to create as much tangible progress as possible towards achieving the goals.
These partnerships can be made up of individuals and organizations across government, business, civil society, philanthropy, whatever and whoever it takes to make things happen. Last year, we announced accelerators around nutrition, digital financial inclusion, women changing the world, and community health workers.
And all of the accelerators announced last year are well on their way to delivering tangible change thanks to the connections and collaborations that were forged in this very community. We're delighted to say that today we'll be launching 3 more accelerators focused on different issues, but still sharing that same overall aim of hitting the goals.
And remember, you've also got your very own interactive space right out there in the atrium. There's so much stuff to check out there. You can connect with each other, swap ideas, thoughts, and of course, contact details using the new Global Goals business cards that you guys should have all gotten. So let's get going.
Now, later this morning, Melinda Gates will return to introduce us to a group of truly inspirational activists who will tell us how they made change happen despite the significant barriers they faced.
And very soon, the creative force behind the global goals, Richard Curtis, together with actor Stephen Fry, will tell us how the goals came to be and why they are so crucial.
But first, with the help of Bill Gates and David Senge, a goalkeeper here last year, and now the first ever Chief Innovation Officer of Sierra Leone, we're about to ask the question, is poverty inevitable?
Hi, I'm Moyina David Senge, the Chief Innovation Officer for the government of Sierra Leone, and I'll be your host for this session. This year, Goalkeepers is continuing on its audacious mission of accelerating progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. To do that, we need inspired governments, dedicated organizations, and committed people to take action every day and everywhere. No one actor can solve these challenges alone. That's why they're called the global goals. But together, we can transform our world. During the next hour, we will dig into examples of what it will take to help us achieve these goals. To help us understand the challenge and opportunity before us, I would like to welcome to the stage someone who is a technology and development nerd. Most importantly, he's goalkeeper enthusiast number one. Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Gates.
Well, thanks, David. I'm excited to be here. And of course, we're focusing on young people today because of their importance in transforming the world. Of course, I'm not one of these young people, but I do remember what it was like to be rebellious and have new ideas. I waited until my parents were asleep, and I snuck out of the house in the middle of the night to go up and use a computer in the University of Washington's physics department. There were a few hours in the middle of the night when the graduate students weren't there, and I could have a few hours on this big, amazing machine. The machine was the size of a room, and it was about 8,000 times less powerful than what you have in your pocket. But I would do anything to get my hands on it and try out to see what the magic of software could do. And that's the kind of rebelliousness or new thinking that I'm hoping we can tap into today. The natural desire of youth to change things and make the world better. Well, we're going to start the conversation my favorite way, which is looking at the numbers. The movie asked a really stark question: is poverty inevitable? And there's a clear answer here. The answer is no. We asked 2,000 people on the internet about what they thought was going on with poverty. We told them the 1990 number and asked them to guess where it had gone. And their guess was that it had fallen from that 36% down to 22%. In fact, the real line is far, far better. It drops all the way down to 9%. That means 1.2 billion people have overcome extreme poverty since 1990. As the economist Max Roser has said, the newspapers could have run a headline: number of people in poverty fell by 137,000 since yesterday, every single day for 25 years, and been right. Real news. According to the World Bank, this definition we use is a cutoff of about $1.90 per day or less. So imagine what it's like to live in extreme poverty. You have to think about the basics like your next meal all the time. An extremely poor family mostly has access only to the food that they grow themselves. If you have a bad harvest, one of your animals gets sick, you're going to have a period where you're not getting enough food. Daughters in these families have to gather water and wood. They have to cook dinners on an open fire with lots of smoke, and then they have to clean everything up. If they get a chance to do schoolwork at all, it's going to be very late at night. So if they need a lamp, if they have it, to be able to do that work. So the upshot is, if you're extremely poor, your time and energy really goes to mere survival. Getting out of extreme poverty is not the end goal. We want people lifted up way beyond extreme poverty, but it's really the start that gets things going, that gets countries on the way to self-sufficiency and moving towards middle income. So this is not just about the individuals, it's also about the countries themselves. Now, to look at this visually, we've created some graphs here where we have a single dot representing 1 million people. And so right now you're seeing the number of dots that represent the number of people who overcame poverty in this last generation, since 1990. And it's really great to see how we made that incredible reduction because it hints, okay, what remains, what do we have to do in the future? And the progress came really in two great waves. The first wave was China. In 1990, not very long ago, 66% of people in China were extremely poor. So you can see all the dots there, each representing, again, 1 million people. But over just a short period, 15 years, their extreme poverty declined by over 500 million. Now, China's a unique place, but the improvement in people's lives there is one of the most astonishing examples of progress in world history. The second wave came in India. Progress there started later, and it's been more gradual, but it's also an impressive trend. India went from 400 million people in extreme poverty in 2005 to just under 100 million today. And over the next several decades, that number is going to drop quite a bit. So the question we face here is, can we create a third great wave of poverty reduction in the rest of the world that will bring extreme poverty near to eradication? Now, our message here, it's not going to be easy. We can go back to our dots, again, looking at each one representing 1 million people, but now we're going to look at the people who remain in extreme poverty. So starting back in 1990, we're going to take all those dots and do a pie chart that gives us a sense of what it looked like by region back in 1990. So you can see sub-Saharan Africa, the blue part there, represented a relatively small slice of extreme poverty in 1990. But because this has fallen so quickly in East and South Asia, so we're dropping the total number of people a lot. But also, as we drop those numbers, you can see that that sub-Saharan slice, the blue slice, is getting to be a very substantial part of this pie. In fact, if we project this out to 2050, it's rather stunning. It's a trend that I sort of was aware of, but even I was surprised when we ran these numbers that it shows that almost 90% of the people remaining in extreme poverty will be in sub-Saharan Africa by 2050. If we zoom in even more and take it at the country level, we can see that there's quite variability in the progress here. We see that a few countries represent a lot of what remains, about a dozen here. In fact, if you just take the two countries with the most people, which would be the Democratic Republic of Congo and Nigeria, that alone will be 40% of the entire world's population in extreme poverty. And if we zoom even further in and look at a map of Nigeria and say, okay, where inside Nigeria we have this, this is based on 2013 data, we can see that it's not spread evenly. As you move towards the north, there's far more poverty than in the south. And so this gap that you're seeing there grows quite a bit over time. And so what this means is that this poverty is going to be a feature of life in a few places. And these are places where there are the fewest opportunities. Often, some of these places, there's violence, a lack of stability. These are places where climate change will make these subsistence farmers' lives more difficult. Also, these are often places where the governance is not providing the primary health care or education, even at a basic level. And every one of these places are exactly where we're experiencing rapid population growth. The geography of births in the world is changing, and this is something that's really fascinating. Over the rest of the century, the number of babies born stays about the same. We've really reached peak baby. But if we look at this chart, we can see that the places that they're born are changing. So we've split it into a blue line, which is babies born in sub-Saharan Africa every year, and the white line, which is the entire rest of the world. And you can see you go from today, where it's only 37 million of those births, up to where by the end of the century, it's almost getting up to the point where half of the babies on the planet are born, not just in sub-Saharan Africa, but overwhelmingly in the poorest parts of sub-Saharan Africa. So the 10 countries projected to be the poorest in the world in 2050 currently are only 10% of the world's births. By 2050, they're 20%, and by 2100, using these UNFPA numbers, could get up to 40%. So in short, babies are going to be born in what are currently the toughest circumstances in the most challenging places in the world. They'll be born in situations where they'll at least start out spending all their time as a family, as an individual, just seeking out the food that they need and not have as much time to invest in their education, invest in building assets. So we really need to address this. We need to double down on key investments in these very tough places. The first two waves are also instructive in terms of what these investments should look like. Let's start with the investments in the people, primarily in their health and education, which economists, including now the World Bank, is emphasizing this human capital. China set a great example here. In 1990, 1 in 3 Chinese children were chronically malnourished, which means that not only physically but also mentally, they never fully developed. They did not achieve their potential. And the typical Chinese youth never got into high school. Well, since then, China has solved that malnutrition problem. And in education now, almost all students not only graduate from high school, a very high percentage, almost half, attend college. And so, you know, you just look at those cities in China and you see, wow, something miraculous came out of those human capital investments. And so to create this third wave of poverty reduction, Sub-Saharan Africa's young need the same level of investment in their human capital. Of course, the size of that investment is going to be very large because of this population growth, the doubling in their youth population by 2050. And so human capital and our looking at that has never been more important. In Sub-Saharan Africa, for this youthful generation, we need to get a lot of resources there and help those countries build these systems. Our partner, the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, did these poverty projections on the continent, considering a couple of scenarios where the key thing we varied was the investment level in human capital. And so the status quo shows that the absolute number of people in extreme poverty will go up by about 50 million by 2050. That's disappointing. Even more sobering, though, is if we look at what some donors have talked about doing in terms of disengaging, if we look at governments not continuing to improve, there you get a very dire situation where the number almost doubles. It gets up to 672 million. But we also took a scenario, the one we believe in, the one we all want to rally around, where we increase that human capital investment, where we improve those health systems and those primary and secondary schools. And there, we're able to drive that extreme poverty down by over 90 million from where we stand today. So the gap between the bad scenario and the good scenario is over a factor of 2, almost 400 million people. So that's really what's at stake. I really believe it's possible to do the best case scenario. In fact, with the right innovation, which is the most powerful force in the world, we might be able to do even better than that. You know, a great example of this was what a discussion like this would have been about India back in the 1960s. The experts were very, very pessimistic. They looked at the population growth, they looked at the agricultural sector, and they projected mass famine because of sort of a Malthusian outstripping of the population to the food production. The book, The Population Bomb, was a best-selling book. You know, everybody was talking about that. Very, very dire. But the thing they missed was the innovations known collectively as the Green Revolution. Rockefeller Foundation, Ford Foundation, Norman Borlaug, a lot of heroes in that story. And the end result was that India in the 1960s, the yield for wheat, which was very, very meager, was changed by modern technology and techniques. And now we're at almost 4 times the productivity that is output for a certain amount of land. That kind of innovation, in fact, that's another innovation we need to bring to Africa, but innovation can appear in many, many different sectors. And so we need a phenomenon like that to actually beat these predictions. You'll learn in a few minutes about some great innovations. Soil maps and how great they are, how we can pick the right fertilizer there. You'll learn about digital technology to help us understand what's going on with malnutrition and help solve that. You'll learn about education and how by getting reading resources out there to kids, their natural curiosity will let them help develop the key skills. And so it's investing in this innovation and backing young innovators across sub-Saharan Africa that we can get a very positive scenario. The world we want, a world in which every person can dream of a better future and make it come true, is a world without extreme poverty. Thank you.
Wow, wow. Please come. Thank you, Bill. That was fascinating. Now, that is the power of data and the power of analytics, people. You see, we need to drive our policies and innovations with data to ensure that this third wave of poverty reduction is sustainable and leaves our planet more resilient. I left Sierra Leone as a teenager to pursue my education. 14 years later, with a PhD in biomechatronics and a young family, I moved back home at the call of my president, His Excellency Julius Maada Bio, to be part of something audacious: the creation of Sierra Leone's Directorate of Science, Technology, and Innovation. Now, Sierra Leone is known for a complicated set of socio-political challenges. It's a post-Civil War and post-Ebola country of rapid population growth. Now, this complexity is why our government has opted to make Sierra Leone a blueprint for global development through innovation, with a focus on education, human capital development, effective and efficient governance, accountability and transparency, national environmental resilience, economic diversification, and investments in science, technology, and innovation as key drivers for delivery. Now, to discuss the commitments our government is making and the impacts we're striving for, and to have a conversation with Bill about how the ideas he expressed can work on the ground, I have the honor to welcome to the stage the President of Sierra Leone, His Excellency Julius Maada Bio. Welcome.
Welcome. How are you?
Yes. President Bio, welcome.
Thank you.
You've heard Bill's remarks, and as the president of Sierra Leone, where about 65% of the population are under 30, maternal and child mortality numbers need real improvement, and the population is growing very quickly. What are you doing to make the country healthier and better educated?
Thank you very much. I want to use this opportunity to extend to everyone here greetings from Sierra Leone. We've had our share of problems: civil war for 11 years, Ebola, man-made catastrophes, and also recently we had a mudslide. With that in mind, I've had the opportunity of leading the country for a very short time as a military officer. With that hindsight, what I have thought of the things I've harbored was how I could accelerate development in Sierra Leone to catch up with the rest of the world. We are lagging behind, I know that, but we don't want to go forward, we want to catch up with the rest of the world. So I have established a list of priorities, but sitting on top of that particular list of priorities is the human capital development. I campaigned on that, and I'm working on that. I am an example of human capital development and how it impacts development. I come from a village of less than 300 people. I didn't have shoes to go to school. I hardly had a chair to sit on at school. But when I look at how I have traveled a long and difficult journey from that village to the State House, that is the White House in Sierra Leone, I think education, which is human capital development, has played a critical role. And why do I say so? Because my mother, I lost my dad at the age of 4. My mother could not read or write, but she understood several years ago that developing the human capital is the most important assignment she had in order to make a change in this world. So she kept me in school, and I did my primary school and secondary school in Sierra Leone. I was fortunate to come to the United States, where I did my first and second degrees. And I said to myself, I'm going to change Sierra Leone. I started first with a business, and I ended up just employing 1,000 people. I said, this is not enough. This is not what I want to do. I have earned my degrees in one of the best countries in the world. I have to change Sierra Leone. The audacity that I wanted to do, I could not do as a businessman. So I decided again to try politics. It was quite difficult. You can't do politics without money, and I didn't have it. So the capital for politics anywhere in the world is the people. The people are the ones that make the decision as to who leads, especially in a democratic dispensation. So I got around and got a message for them that resonates very well with them and sits very well with everybody. I want to develop this country, but I know that development is about people and it's for people. Therefore, you cannot develop a country if you do not develop the human capital. Development itself, as we all know, we are grappling with that around the world. We are crunching statistics every day. We change paradigms on a daily basis. We have tried several theories that have failed. How can somebody who does not know numbers engage in that? How can we sustain development if we do not educate first the most important resource we have on earth, which is human capital?
So that's people and education are your priorities in this case, human capital and free quality education. And Bill, you've just heard what President Bill's priorities are. As the world's chief innovation officer, what current technologies and innovations are you most excited about that will help transform societies in countries like Sierra Leone?
Well, there's so many things we need. We need a vaccine for HIV, for malaria, and we're hard at work on that. We need better seeds, better food fortification to deal with the malnutrition issues so these kids are ready to be educated. Another whole category that I'm fascinated by is taking the digital tools to track activity. So can we see, is the teacher showing up? Can we see whether the kids, their learning is improving? Can we see if the vaccines are in stock and immediately take action if it's not there? Even at the top level, can we take the government budget, both the domestic resources and the donor money, and track it better so there's a real sense of where did this money have a strong impact, where did it not? So I think digital visibility on all these different services will help us to find the people who are doing it well, to spread best practices, and to make sure that people have a sense that the government is learning and constantly improving. So that's a kind of a new category. Young people in each of their countries will have to think about what does that look like. But if we can improve these systems, health and education systems through digital tracking, including the money getting to the right places, I think that alone would be a gigantic innovation.
President Bill, why now? I mean, what is it about the state of the world and where Sierra Leone is at this very moment that makes you believe that focusing on human development is the right path to take?
Like I said earlier, the human resource is the most important resource that we have in the world. And any attempt to embark on development without first going back to the human resource will never work. All the countries in the world that have advanced in the past couple of years, from the examples we saw, are countries that are investing and continue to invest on human resource. I believe that through technology, again, I want to say thank you to David, who accepted my invitation to go back home from IBM. I had to find special words to convince him to go back to one of the poorest countries. But I challenged him, and that is the challenge I want to throw to the world. Yes, we are one of the least developed countries in the world, but I believe that we can move and catch up with the rest of the world within a very short time if we use technology. As you were saying, Bill, the education project, which is my flagship project for the government, what I want to do is to really, already I've declared free education, but I want to make this free education from primary school to secondary school not only free or accessible, but also quality that is competitive around the world. How can I use technology to deliver tuition, quality or world standard tuition to the last village in Sierra Leone? We have started the process, but we need the technological infrastructure to be able to deliver quality. I believe that the last boy or girl in the village getting the same quality tuition like those in the United States can perform very well. I believe in that, and that is why I, from a very poor home, that is how I got to sit by you. And I believe that we can move a lot of other people. Why free education? People are so poor that they cannot afford up to $20 a year to pay for their kids. So a lot of kids are dropping out of school. We do not have the wherewithal, but I have challenged the nation, and we have started the process. This year, every child going to a government-assisted school is doing so freely, and we are providing not only tuition, but also textbooks, uniforms, and providing nutrition so that that can keep them in school. So I truly believe that we can do the quantum leap to catch up with all of you if we use technology as a tool. And that is why I established first the Directorate of Science, Technology, and Innovation. We want to innovate Sierra Leone to catch up with the rest of the world so that we can be part of the world community.
Thank you. Bill, you get the last question. How do you want people to respond to what they hear today? Now, there are lots of people who are in the room and many young people who are viewing this live globally, watching this session. What do you want them to do now? How do you want them to respond?
Well, this week is a special week in the year where we really do focus on these broad goals and where we look at what the challenges are. I think in response to that, people going and visiting, going to Sierra Leone, seeing what's there, thinking about their personal capabilities, their institution's capabilities, say their university or their hospital, can they be paired up with an institution in Africa to spread those best practices? For people who are lucky to have a great education, the idea of doing like you're doing, going back, diving in, helping out, modernizing these systems, seeing new opportunity, that's the type of engagement we need, and we need it on a very big scale. I do believe that innovation is key here, but only if that innovation focuses on this big gap. The numbers look very, very daunting, but we need to engage ourselves and surprise the world on the progress we make.
You've heard it, people. Thank you, President Bill. I look forward to working with you to truly make Sierra Leone an example to the world of how innovation can help us achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And Bill, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Now, we've talked a lot about innovation. And now let's actually see what it means in action. Now, I'm excited to welcome to the stage our first guest innovator of the session, who will tell us about using 3D imaging to advance the world of nutrition. Maria Elena Jeffords.
Thank you. When our children were 5 and 2 years old, my husband was diagnosed with oral cancer. Over the next several months, he had chemos and radiation, a feeding tube, you name it. It was really intense. The technology they used was so state-of-the-art that at one point the doctors fitted him with a special mask to make sure that not a single non-cancerous part of his face and neck was exposed to radiation. As a result, my husband has been cancer-free for 8 years. So that's how far our science and knowledge have brought us in the fight against some diseases. So it's frustrating in my work that we're still struggling to solve the global problem of malnutrition in populations that limits the healthy growth and development of children. We know that malnutrition is an underlying cause of nearly half of child deaths. We also know that severe forms of malnutrition are linked to physical and cognitive underdevelopment, sometimes reflected in stunting when kids don't grow as tall as they should. In some poor countries, as many as 2 in every 5 children suffer from stunting. We've made an incredible amount of progress, and we've learned a lot about fighting stunting. We just don't know much about how to fix stunting on a large scale. It's one of the most frustrating challenges in global health. One reason it's so frustrating is that malnutrition and stunting are umbrella terms that cover a huge range of deficiencies and developmental difficulties that affect a lot of complicated interacting systems. But another reason stunting is such a problem is that we have really bad data about how big kids actually are. So here's one way we currently get our data. In household surveys, teams take measurements using a bulky board called a stadiometer, a scale, measuring tapes. You need at least 2 people to hold the child in the right position, and one of them takes the measurements. Then they do it all over again to make sure the numbers match. Both people have to be trained to the standards, and they have to keep those standards consistent as they travel all around a region or country until the end of the data collection campaign. Now, think about any 1-year-old baby you know. She's probably really cute and good at crawling around and spitting out whatever she's being fed and squirming and crying. What is she not good at? Sitting or lying still on demand, letting strangers grab her, not chewing on equipment she's curious about. So think about how hard it would be for 2 people she's never seen in her life to take accurate measurements of her length, her weight, her arm circumference, her head circumference, twice in one sitting. So now multiply her by a few thousand, and then try to measure those few thousand babies with equipment that needs completely flat surfaces and 90-degree angles to work in a country where a lot of people live in homes without any of those things. Add the fact that data collection can last for months. That's a lot of squirming, crying baby tantrums for survey teams to measure without letting their standards slip. Now, some of you may be thinking, okay, so the measurements are a little off a few centimeters. What's the big deal? Well, I'll give you an example. Not long ago, an anthropometry assessment was done in 2 districts that found almost 30% acute malnutrition. These set off emergency alarms and calls for funds to intervene. My colleague was sent there and then quickly led 2 follow-up anthropometry surveys and found half that amount of malnutrition. All this money and resources were spent on therapeutic food and equipment and staff in response to a crisis that didn't exist, which also means that maybe another region desperately needed millions of dollars worth of therapeutic food, equipment, and staff, but because their measurements were just as inaccurate in the other direction, nobody had any idea that a lot of people there were acutely malnourished and in crisis. So how do we solve this problem? We start by bringing the equipment we use to measure children's surveys and surveillance systems into the modern era. We can kill cancer by shooting lasers at it because we're relying on cutting-edge technology like MRIs and lasers. But for surveillance, we use equipment based on technology that was available to the ancient Romans. Luckily, things might be changing soon. Our team is evaluating one type of technology that uses inexpensive, easily portable equipment that captures 3D body images to calculate body measurements. We've had these kinds of technologies to do this for a while, but only with equipment too expensive and bulky to really be used to address malnutrition on a large scale. This and other emerging technologies like it could revolutionize the way we collect body measurements. For the 3D body image technology, you don't need a stadiometer or a scale or a measuring tape, and all you need is a tablet or a phone and a special camera. You have a kid stand or lie in certain positions. Her mom or dad can hold her hands if you want, and you take a few scans from the front and a few from the back, and you're done. The scans are uploaded and later calculated into height and other body measurements that in controlled studies have proven as accurate as those taken by expert manual anthropometrists. The idea is that the 1,000th scan the equipment does will be exactly as accurate as the first scan. What's more, as these types of technological advances continue, maybe someday anybody could do the scans. So a child's mother, a grandmother, anybody in this room, as long as you were able to touch a screen a few times. I'd like to introduce my wonderful colleague, Dr. Karim Bougma, to give us a look at this system.
Thank you to my wonderful colleague, Maria. So the CDC and the CDC foundations are helping to evaluate this technology. To start the station, we enter first the identification of the child. It can be the name or the ID coded. It can be the sex, the date of birth, and other information. And we also make sure that the environment is suited for the measurement. We make sure that we have a flat surface, and we make sure that we avoid direct natural light. Shade or dim light should be enough. And we also make sure that the child and the floor are well captured on the screen of the tablet. So to make it really real, I would like to have a volunteer. Can I have a volunteer?
Yeah, oh, I have one.
Okay. Hola.
Ladies and gentlemen, my daughter Nina Sofia.
Hola, Nina, can you make your hand like this? Okay, like you make last time? Okay? Okay?
Eso.
Yeah, great. You're doing great, Nina. That's wonderful. Okay, one more time. We take a few scans from the front. That's great. So, Nina, can you look at now mom and dad? Can you turn and look mom and dad? Look and turn, yeah, and you do the same. Wonderful. You're great. You're doing wonderful. That's really amazing. Another one. Another one. So you have the screen on the scan. Okay, that's great. So, and whenever, so we're done with the scan, and whenever the tablet is connected to internet, The scans are automatically uploaded to the system, to the cloud. And now you can see what we get on the system on the computer. And these images will be integrated front and back. And we're using an algorithm. We're going to extract the measurement of the child, height, head circumference, and her arm circumference. Okay. So thank you very much, Nina. So thank you very much, Nina. That's wonderful. Okay. So Elena, I'm giving you back to you. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Nina. Great job. Right now, this technology is being tested in Guatemala, which has the highest rate of stunting in Latin America. We're helping evaluate the 3D imaging technology's accuracy and acceptability in real-world household survey settings. The results for this evaluation are not in yet. But with continued innovations, we could soon have more tools capable of giving practitioners and policymakers much more accurate data much more quickly in the fight against malnutrition, both over the long term and in short term emergencies like droughts or famines. But improvements in body measurements won't just help on a population level. They could also help doctors make sure they're giving individual kids the right treatments and suggesting the right diets. For adults, these technological innovations could be powerful tools against obesity in low and middle income countries. The problem of malnutrition is far too big to be solved with just one technology. But innovations like 3D body imaging have the potential to be powerful tools that could help a lot of kids be a lot healthier a lot sooner.
Thank you, Karim.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, David.
And thank you, Nina. I mean, I might be slightly biased, but I think she has a future as a scientist. It is time now to bring on someone who also sees data as key to answering some of the world's mysteries. At this time, it's a mystery that lies beneath our feet. Welcome to the stage, ladies and gentlemen, William Wu.
Thank you, David. So hi, everyone. My name is Will, and as David said, today I'm going to talk to you guys about dirt. Now, I have to say that I feel a little bit strange to be the one on the stage telling you the story, because nothing in my life up to this point ever suggested that I'd be talking about dirt. When I was a kid, I had much bigger plans for myself. As a child, I dreamed about being an astronaut. I wanted to build rocket ships to explore strange new worlds and make contact with alien life. That was my dream. So I studied things like physics, computing as a kid, and later actually worked on telecommunications at NASA. My thinking then was, the Earth is such a tiny spot on the cosmic scale. Why do we bother studying anything down here when there's so much more to see up there? But over time, I realized that looking farther and farther away is not necessarily as interesting as simply looking closer. So I left my life in California. I decided to build my own tech company named QED, and we try to focus on problems that are a little more down to earth. And today, I'd like to tell you guys that if you're searching for mystery, there's actually no need to leave this planet, or even to leave your doorstep, because one of the greatest mysteries of this universe is literally right underneath your feet. And that mystery is the soil, the dirt we walk on every single day. Although this soil is only a 1 meter thin layer of the Earth's crust, all living things depend on that layer to survive. First of all, the soil is our reservoir for storing and moving all the nutrients, liquids, and gases needed for life. About 90% of all the water that's used for agricultural food production is in the soil, as well as 2,300 gigatons of organic carbon. Now, that soil organic carbon is generated through one of nature's greatest performances. At this very moment beneath your feet, there's a nasty orchestra of earthworms, insects, snails, bacteria, and fungi furiously working beneath our feet, decomposing all the dead stuff underneath us into the nutrients and minerals that can be accessible to the next generation. Therefore, one could say that soil is the resurrecting force that transforms death into life. And yet, while we have depended on soil since the beginning of civilization, we still know surprisingly little about it. For example, few can tell us what exactly soil is. Now, we know that good soil looks and feels like this dark brown, spongy cake that smells fresh, right? But the exact composition of that cake is still a mystery. After all, a single teaspoon of soil contains more distinct microbes in it than all the humans on planet Earth. So it's a really complicated substance. Another basic thing that we don't know is what's called the soil nutrient budget. Underneath our feet, what is the current level of acidity, carbon, nitrogen, and other nutrients beneath us? We need to know that because whenever you grow food, you extract these nutrients from the soil as a kind of price that you have to pay. And if we're going to pay back our debt, we need to put those nutrients back into the soil somehow. Unless you keep the nutrient budget balanced, farmers are not going to be able to continue producing the food that we eat. And then lastly, when it comes to food security or financial security, the world has really yet to appreciate the true value of soil. Soil is simply one of the most valuable resources of any nation. It sustains $4 billion of agricultural products worldwide every year. And from history, we know that whenever a nation loses its soil fertility, it will collapse. So in agriculture, we're just facing this huge problem of how do you measure soil and also plant health across continents. You could call it yet another big data problem. But in ag, the big data problem is always, where is the data, right? So that's why the Africa Soil Information Service, or AFSIS, was created back in 2009. And AFSIS aims to develop clever strategies to collect missing data about the soils of Africa. Now, why Africa? Well, we focus on Africa because the future of Africa's food security depends crucially on its agricultural growth. And we know that Africa's soils are also suffering the most right now from widespread nutrient depletion and from erosion. Now, this project has been an enormous challenge, requiring the collaboration of many international institutions, like the ones you see here, as well as the national labs in various countries. We definitely can't say that we solved this problem, but I just want to share a simplified story about what we've done so far. Okay? So, to start, to measure the soil, we actually have to return to space. Where should you take these kinds of measurements? It's really expensive to go out there and collect soil, right? And so you only want to collect soil measurements in places that actually matter to farmers, where you have some croplands and you have some houses. So if you want to find those kinds of places efficiently, we built an app called GeoSurvey. And this is a crowdsourcing software for analyzing satellite imagery. So as you can see, users are shown random maps of the Earth, and they can trace their mouse or their finger on a tablet to trace all the croplands and the houses and the forests of Africa and worldwide. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, are you just manually marking this up across the whole world? No. We trained the computer with enough examples to do this for us. So thanks to millions of submissions sent to GeoSurvey, we can see the computer automatically marking up entire countries as shown here. So armed with these kinds of maps, now we have a strategic game plan for places that our field teams should target to most efficiently collect the soil. Our partners in Tanzania, Ghana, Ethiopia have spent countless hours in the field, traversing deserts, crossing rivers, scaling mountains, all for the sake of collecting dirt. Here you can see one of our staff in Tanzania driving an auger into the ground to extract a core of dirt that's then bagged, barcoded, and georeferenced with our mobile apps. In fact, everything we try to do with AFSIS has a 100% digital data workflow. So then we have to bring those soils back to the lab for processing. Now, traditionally, soil scientists use a process that's called wet chemistry. And if you're running a national survey, that can easily cost you millions of dollars to do. So to make this more affordable, we use machines like this, infrared spectrometers, which are 10 times cheaper and only run on the cost of electricity. What they do is they shine infrared light on the soil, and then by measuring the reflections of that light, surprisingly, we can predict certain nutrients quite well. So for the nerds in the audience, I have some regression plots that show the goodness of our predictions for certain nutrients like pH, nitrogen, and carbon. And so what we're seeing here are the predicted values using the dry chemistry method versus the traditional wet chemistry method. Now, the increased affordability of this kind of method allows us to collect much more data than previously available. If you added up all the soil chemistry data collected in Africa prior to the year 2000, it only adds up to around 18,000 samples, as shown in this graph. But then, thanks to AFSIS and these kinds of efforts over the past few years, we've already been able to collect much more data, and that can be then interpolated to produce these kinds of nutrient concentration maps of carbon at a large scale. So that's a really quick summary of the kind of interesting work that we've been doing with dirt. But this is really not done. It's only a first step, and we want your help, everyone in this audience, to make the giant leap. I'd like to close with two challenges that I'd like the next generation of scientists, technology, engineers, and mathematicians to solve. The first challenge is about advocacy. We need governments to take a renewed interest in soil. Okay? Why? Well, most of the world's poorest people are employed in agriculture. Their whole livelihood hinges on the fertility of that soil. And they do the best they can with the tools that they have, but these farmers can't control a lot of things, like changes to their entire landscape or what kinds of agricultural inputs and fertilizers they can access. But if we use soil data, governments can design soil conservation efforts. They can guide the private sector to develop the right fertilizers for improving farmer yields and farmer incomes. And my second challenge out there is for the technologists. If we want to build really high accuracy maps of soil and plant health, we're going to need a lot more data. And that's going to require serious moonshot innovation. So first of all, it's really expensive right now to be collecting soil samples, shipping them from the field to the lab. And secondly, while the instruments we've been using are cheaper than before, they're still a bit too expensive and delicate for many rural and remote areas. So if we're going to move forward, I suggest we channel this punk science movement to develop low-cost, handheld sensors that can get everybody involved with science. So on the screen and in my hand, we have some examples of homemade spectrometers from the public lab at CERN, as also at my company, QED. So this thing is made from components that you guys all know about. PVC pipes, I got a razor blade in here, AA batteries, Raspberry Pi, DVDs for diffraction gratings, and of course, you've all got this supercomputer sitting in your pocket, which interfaces to produce an instant spectrogram. So we have a very powerful device at minimal cost. So I challenge the next generation to do better than us and make this even cheaper and more scalable to collect data at scale. So, well, I'm not done. So yeah, that's my talk about soil, the big data problem that's hidden underneath your feet. I just wanted to end with one of my favorite quotations, passed down from another engineer named Bill down to me. In God we trust, but all others must bring data. Thank you.
Thanks, William. Thank you. I'll never look at dirt in the same way again. It's important to remember that though we've heard from some amazing innovators, they're not the only ones in the world, or even the only ones in this room with us. Now, we're proud to announce our first accelerator, an organization run by one of our fellow goalkeepers, one that's going to advance education for many more children. Literacy is the building block for almost all learning, and yet 175 million young people in low and middle income countries are unable to read a single sentence, which is why we're so thrilled to reveal this new partnership. Room to Read works to improve early literacy in 10 countries in Asia and Africa. They work closely with governments to design interventions that meet the particular needs of children in each country, whether that be training teachers, establishing libraries, or getting quality reading materials into students' hands in their own local languages. Today, I'm excited to announce that thanks to these funding partners committing over $3.5 million between them, Room to Read will scale up their work across 3 countries, Vietnam, South Africa, and India, taking them a long way toward reaching over 1.1 million more children over the next 3 years. But we could go even further. Now, I've been working with Room to Read to create a plan to roll out a new literacy program in my country, Sierra Leone, but only if we can find the additional funding needed. So this is our call to action to all of you. Let's make it happen, people. If you want to learn more or indeed invest, there will be an accelerator station in the atrium at the end of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an honor and true pleasure to spend the morning with you. Please join me in welcoming Andrew Nalani, an extraordinary young man who will close out our session. Thank you.
When I was 8, I spent a lot of time in my parents' living room in Uganda teaching my imaginary class. In my left hand, I held a stick. In my right, I clutched a piece of chalk. I yelled at the kids when they were not paying attention. I walked around checking in on their work, and yes, I spanked them hard when they made mistakes. The good news is that I was the only human being in the living room. The bad news is that my mother had to replace her sofa set. I was merely imitating what I'd absorbed from my teachers. I'd learned from them that in order to be a successful student, I had to avoid mistakes. I'd also learned to avoid my inner life. When we buried my mother, an aunt of mine said, "If I hear you thinking of her, it will be you and me," a phrase in our language that meant I would be in trouble. "Just focus on your books," she said. And so I did. When I passed the Uganda national exams with flying colors, the adults around me celebrated my test scores, but what they couldn't see was my own inner turmoil. I was succeeding by denying my own need for support. And so when 10 years later, I attended a youth leadership program at the United World College, a high school in Canada, and the first male coordinator, the first adult male coordinator I saw was wearing an earring and thermal underwear, which to me looked like women's tights. I found myself thinking, I am an evangelical Christian and I'm going to be taught by a bunch of atheists and homosexuals. What have I thrown myself into? This was the first time that the program confounded my expectations, but it certainly wasn't the last. I thought we were going to sit in auditoriums watching PowerPoint presentations on how to be a great leader. Instead, we found ourselves in the middle of a forest discussing the war on indigenous ways of life and the war against their ways of life. My mistakes were welcome in this environment, and they were even celebrated because I could learn from them. Where I expected to be told what to do, I was invited to ask my own questions and to imagine my own answers in the world. But I certainly will never forget the day when I finally recognized what that truly meant. We were standing in a meadow, and David, the coordinator with the earring, had tied two ends of a heavy rope together, formed a circle with it on the ground, and asked all 65 male members of our community to stand around it, pick it up, and pull outward hard to make the tautest circle we could. He then said, if you've never been authentically supported by other men in your life, step into the circle. 7 guys stepped in. I felt the butterflies in my stomach, but I held myself back. I didn't know whether I could share something personal in a learning environment, let alone risk being laughed at by a group of other males for expressing myself. He made the invitation again. If you've never been authentically supported by other men in your life, step into the circle. Still, I didn't move. I didn't know whether I could trust my peers with some of my own life struggles. But when David made the invitation for the third and last time, if you've never been authentically supported by a group of other males before, step into the circle. I didn't want to move in the world with my struggles unnoticed and unacknowledged anymore. And so I stepped in. Our task was to climb onto the rope and walk around the circle in midair, keeping our balance with our hands on the other guy's shoulders. I could see the veins bulging out of my peers' hands, sweat dripping down their faces as they pulled, like my life depended on it. On the outside, I was suspended. On the inside, I was suspended. When I came back to my original spot and stepped off the rope, I sobbed like my heart had been ripped open. I had realized that for the first time in my life, my own inner life was encouraged and welcomed in a learning environment. That I could mourn my mother without shame. That these people who did not share my own beliefs of right and wrong were not doomed for hell. That I didn't have to buy the messages I'd internalized about what it means to be a man in my own culture, messages at the root of violence towards self and the other. While I stood there and wept, David came up to me, hugged me, and whispered, "I got you, brother." By the end of the program, it felt like somebody had given my life back to me. I found myself thinking, why has it taken 17 years of my life to feel alive about an educational experience? I returned to school believing for the first time that I could think something up and make it happen, not just for myself, but for my community too. What was different? I had recognized that I didn't have to hide my ideas, my thoughts, my uncertainties, my voice from the world just to be a successful student. Since then, I have worked with Partners for Youth Empowerment to design education programs for 14 to 18-year-olds in Uganda. Participant after participant says something of the version, I discovered a whole new side to myself I didn't know existed. What these testimonials are screaming is that young people need an education system in their lives that supports adults to partner with them, not to quash their potential, but to ignite the spark of their curiosity. I come from a country where 80% of the population is under the age of 35. These youth are growing up in a system that has made incredible strides to get young people into schools, and rightly so. But this same system, employers in Uganda say, fails to instill in youth the so-called soft skills of creativity, collaboration across lines of difference, of idealism. I was 17 when I realized that these skills were crucial for my success, not just in school, but also in life. If a 3-week program could change what I thought I was capable of, imagine what could happen if we use our resources, our research, our innovation to create an education system that helps young people, not just the rich and the privileged, but all of them to feel alive about their own education. Today, young people are standing suspended on a rope, and they are counting on us to hold it taut because their lives depend on it. If we can get each young person on this planet access to a transformative education, we will leave this world a much better place for those who will be here long after we are gone. A deep bow to all the young people in this room and around the world, and the adults who are partnering with them to make a difference the best ways they know how. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for so generously sharing your story. A huge thank you to Bill, to David, and to all the speakers who made that a truly fascinating session. Amongst all the data and the insight, all of us here have got something in common today. Whether you're an innovator, an educator, or a communicator, you can all play your part in making these goals happen. But what are the global goals really? And I mean really. I hope at this late stage no one thinks they've got anything to do with football. There may be questions like who chose the color scheme and why are there 17 goals? Well, all of these questions and many more are about to be answered by two people who are just goal crazy.
heard someone talking about these United Nations global goals.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Pipe dream, right?
Well, no.
Never gonna happen?
Nice if it did. I mean, there would be no
Yeah,
poverty.
yeah, I mean, that would be really nice.
Just knock climate change on its ass.
Yeah, praise the Lord.
And injustice and inequality.
Hallelujah.
Yes.
I hate that stuff. So unjust, so unequal, right? But listen,
okay.
You gotta face the facts, Billy, okay? It's never gonna happen. Bucket of nuts to get this sort of big stuff done. You'd have to get every single country in the world to agree to work on it.
Yeah, that's what the global goals are.
No, I mean every single country.
Yes, 193 countries.
Okay. Well, look, that's all very well saying, oh, wouldn't it be nice for everything to be completely sorted? But here's what you would have to do. You got to deal with all the tough shit.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the SDGs do. 169 different targets. Every single thing analyzed and organized. The most forensic study of society in history.
Right. But then nothing happens.
Yeah, except that some countries have completely adopted them.
Yeah, these tiny little pretend countries with 8 people and a king. Countries that no one's ever heard of.
Denmark, Rwanda, Japan?
Okay, I mean, I've heard of those. But look, let's get serious for a second, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a serious guy.
You are.
And I understand exactly how the world works. And this kind of thing is never gonna happen without big business.
Like Unilever?
Yes!
Vodafone?
Yes!
Coca-Cola?
No, I'm good, actually. I've been trying to cut down.
The truth is that huge businesses have gotten on board.
Wow. Okay. The big business boys want to get in bed with the United Nations. Casa, please! But it don't mean shit without a whole wave of campaigners fighting for them.
You mean like young people?
Yeah, fat chance of them getting off the phones and doing something.
The women's movement, innovators, activists.
Yeah, when the Chicago Cubs win the World Series, am I right?
Well, the truth is that there's literally thousands of them fighting for the goals. I mean, this generation of young people is the most active generation for decades. And not that it's important, but the Cubs did also win the World Series, so.
Shut up!
You were there with me.
Oh, yeah, I was at that game.
2016, yeah.
Oh, that was fun. Listen, you've made your point, Billy, all right? But these are just kids with a dream. The global goals don't stand a chance without some sort of Avengers-style super team of optimistic, intelligent change makers with real power. And if you're telling me that that exists, then I'm a Dutchman.
Well, about that.
Having one Dutch uncle by marriage does not make me Dutch.
No, it's just on the subject of the whole global goals team of superheroes.
Whoever you say, I'm not gonna be impressed.
President Macron of France? Malala? Prime Minister Trudeau? Graça Machel? Bill and Melinda Gates?
Say Bill's involved?
Yes! Yeah. They're called the Goalkeepers.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I know. I am sick up to here with your cynical and stupid attitude about these great global goals. And they are great, okay? We are gonna get them done, and people like you are not gonna talk me out of it. What the f?
You always be a goalkeeper, and you ain't ever gonna stop neither. You said you always be a goalkeeper, and you ain't ever gonna stop neither. Get down, y'all, go ahead, get down. Get down, y'all, go ahead, get down. Get down, y'all, go ahead, get down. Get down, y'all, go ahead. You said you always be a goalkeeper, and you ain't never gonna stop neither. You said you always be a goalkeeper, and you ain't never gonna stop neither. Get down, y'all, go ahead, get down. Get down, y'all, go ahead, get down. Get down, y'all, go ahead, get down. Get down, y'all, go ahead.
Look here. Yeah. Here we go. Fabulous. That was great. Well, hello, my dear darling ladies and gentlemen. How wonderful to see you all. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's lovely to be back here. It really is a pleasure to be back at Goalkeepers. I'm here with my old friend Richard Curtis, amongst other things, the author of FWAF, 4 Weddings and a Funeral, and La, Love Actually, and he's also a UN advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals, so he's a UNASD. And Richard and I...
I'm sure that's not going to catch on.
No, maybe not. We're old friends, aren't we?
Yeah, we're very old friends.
Yeah.
Well, we're very old.
And friends.
Yeah, I think so. Although we'll see where we are in half an hour. He's experienced at this. I'm a newcomer.
Over the years, we've actually done a lot together for Red Nose Day and Comic Relief, which was the charity that Richard himself founded. And it was particularly interesting when he asked me to join him on this endeavour, which is not about fundraising, more about awareness raising and indeed world changing.
Yeah, so you've just seen that little film, which, as it were, was the Idiot's Guide to Global Goals, but we've got in this room some of the world's cleverest people. So what we're going to try and do in the next few minutes is give a really clear guide. I was very keen to do this today, to the genesis and purpose of the goals and how we think you can use them to change the world, because they are, as it were, at the center of the thesis of everything we're doing today.
And we're going to be quite mathematical. There are going to be lists, and there will definitely be mistakes. There might even be a graphic or two. Well, as you've seen this morning, there better be. I hope there's a graphic or two. We'll all be in trouble. 1, 2, 3, graphic. Oh, fabulous. Graphic violence there.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say that behind this, as we all know, is the battle against true inequality that we all encounter in our lives.
Yeah, I mean, I always want to say this at the beginning of talking about something like the goals. Just to remember that at the core of this is a real emotional commitment that I think people feel in the room to making other people's lives better. I found myself in Ethiopia in 1985, in Wallo at the time of the famine. I remember being taken by a nurse to a place where there were 3 huts, and in one of them were the people who they thought would survive the night. In the next corrugated iron hut, hundreds of people who they thought might. And then in the third, people who they knew wouldn't. And I became very, very aware from that day, and I'm aware of it as it were now in everything I do, of the simultaneity of human suffering, of the fact that we're here in order to eventually make real changes that affect real people's lives who are having a really hard time at the moment. So behind all of this, I think Stephen and I are very keen to say that in the end, everything we say applies back to the reality of changing real people's lives.
Exactly, and we can begin the story in the year 2000. Many of you will know this. It's worth, of course, remembering lots of people watching streaming who won't be familiar with the history of it. On the epic date of 2000, that's when all the countries in the UN agreed on the Millennium Development Goals to try and address some of the world's greatest problems, one of which, of course, was how to spell millennium. There were, better, yes. There were 8 of these goals, and they dealt with key issues, especially aimed at the defeat of extreme poverty, using development aid as one of the main levers to accelerate the engine of change. The period, however, between 2000 and 2015 was a truly extraordinary time. Far from being just the postscript to 9/11, as some saw it, these were, in fact, 15 of the greatest years in human history. And one of the key reasons was because the Millennium Development Goals gave a unique global guide to the change that was needed. At least 21 million extra lives were saved as a result of the MDGs. More than 1 billion people lifted themselves out of extreme poverty. The number of out-of-school children fell dramatically. Child mortality was nearly halved. New HIV infections fell by 40%. Aid from developed countries increased by 66%. The list of what the MDGs helped to make happen is a mightily impressive one. The data are conclusive. When the world focused on alleviating poverty and suffering, it worked.
Yeah. The MDGs also encouraged what a lot of sort of my generation thought of as sort of charitable thing, just the exchange of money, into turning it into a political thing. Because the MDGs were a political promise. So millions of people embraced the idea of charity as something political, partly because the world of politics is evidently where the big money is. So Bob Geldof, my hero, despite his hairstyle and bad language, once pointed out that after a 45-minute meeting with President Mitterrand over a cup of tea, he made 1,000 times more money than during the whole of Band Aid and Live Aid because of the additional money that Mitterrand put into the budget.
Probably wasn't a very good cup of tea, though, was it? Being French, it's not their strength.
No.
But no, I'm sure, I mean,
he's
terrific.
gone.
If it was wine, you know, wine or cakes, amazing cakes.
Amazing cakes. Bob said the cakes were amazing. But the thing is, when the MDGs were falling behind a target a third of the way through in 2005, we used them to launch the Make Poverty History campaign and Live Aid, and that did increase funding and commitments. We were using the MDGs to push politicians.
And yes, the idea of the MDGs themselves was to create a kind of extra energy, extra muscle, extra money, extra motivation, because of international promises that must be honoured. They're not vague dreams. These are actual official promises, and that's what the goals are for.
And as the MDGs came to an end, though, myself and others all became obsessed by the new goals, because surely there had to be new goals when there was so much left to do. There's no point going halfway. President Kennedy didn't say, let's get halfway to the moon, shall we, and then turn back, that'll do. So we had to get the whole job done on extreme poverty.
And so, in the end, after epic negotiation, which some of you will remember, the UN decided on the Sustainable Development Goals, which we prefer to call the global goals, because, if anything, sustainable is just as tricky to spell as millennium. There are, as I'm sure you know, 17 goals comprising 169 targets, which is 193 countries signing up. They're an extremely comprehensive set of aims, much broader than the MDGs. They focused on climate, conservation, jobs, peace and justice, every aspect of living fair lives on a healthy planet. And the world, of course, is a complex conundrum, and the goals are aptly complex. They deal with cities, they deal with industry, with infrastructure, consumption.
And the SDGs are what we would call MDGs, the sequel. But will they work? A lot of people are skeptical about sequels. Will the global goals turn out to be Godfather 2, the masterpiece, or a slight disappointment? Like the sequel to Dumb and Dumber, the masterpiece, Dumb and Dumber 2, less strong.
Well, I really enjoyed it, nonetheless. And why we're here today is to make sure that we can do all we can to make these goals work. Because it's obviously not worth simply writing a piece of paper if it doesn't get traction. And traction, ladies and gentlemen, if we're about anything, it's about traction. Not tractors, traction, but anyway. You know that moment in science fiction movies when they make the jump into hyperspace? You know, they go into hyperdrive. That sort of, so it's a Wookiee noise, something like that. Well, that's what we want to happen with the SDGs. They act as the mechanism to take all our dreams and all your work into a new dimension of effectiveness.
That's the real image, to use the goals, to use the promise, to use their power to try and get more done with the work that you were going to do anyway. Let's look at some of the traction the goals have already got since they came into play at the start of 2016. For a start, there are whole countries that have really adopted them, countries that have deliberately, publicly, organizationally integrated the goals into their political structures, like Rwanda, where President Kagame has launched the Sustainable Development Goals Center for Africa, Japan, which has set up a new cabinet body headed by the Prime Minister to do their very own version of the hyperdrive, Denmark, where the government's unveiled a national action plan based on the SDGs and an SDG investment fund.
And of course there are the huge and ever-increasing number of businesses that are working with them, following the lead of the Business Commission that underlined the SDGs not as a brake on business, but as a $12 trillion opportunity for business. And campaigners, of course, too. They've been in hyperdrive, and they've been getting results. 250,000 charities have aligned themselves with the goals. And that extra power, the hyperdrive effect that their causes gain, is from governments already having promised to make progress in the areas that these NGOs fight for.
And we believe that there's never been a more exciting time to have these goals and promises, because of the level of activism on the rise amongst the younger generation around the world. They are a much better lot, you are, than we were. What were you focusing on when you were 20, Stephen?
Well, I was trying to get into the Cambridge Footlights comedy troupe, and you were trying to get a girlfriend and struggling with the world's worst haircut. Well, actually, second worst haircut.
Yeah, no, that's the world's worst haircut.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not a girlfriend, that's my mum. So that's the only, she was the only one I could find to be photographed next to that. pair. But young people are definitely better in every way. And the good news is that all of these things have led to activity that's happening at a truly macro level. So, Stephen, this is the funnest bit.
It's my Vanna White moment.
Here we go. In 2015, the year the SDGs were agreed, world leaders also signed the Paris Climate Agreement. The following year, the world pledged $13 billion for the Global Fund for HIV, AIDS, and malaria and tuberculosis. In 2017, there was a historic agreement made for the world's oceans, as well as the $2.5 billion pledge at the Family Planning Summit for Women and Girls. So there really is solid progress happening. But of course, we don't live in a dream world, and this momentum without new energy can falter. Progress is possible, but it's clearly not inevitable. And there are clearly issues. We're not standing here saying that the world is not in a troubling and complicated place. Although, interestingly, many of these key issues are the very things that the SDGs, if applied, would address the root causes of. Things like violence, political instability, fragile states, mass migration, rising nationalism, climate change. This is what the SDGs are for. So there are now two conflicting narratives in the public arena, and we would strongly advise you to follow the one we believe in, which is the positive one. The possibility and the necessity of these goals working, and the amazing progress we spoke about in the MDGs era, continuing and expanding into all the other crucial areas that the SDGs cover. And that enormous win that can come from investing in young people and their energy and their activism. But it is a fight.
Yes, and now we're really getting to the meat and potatoes. Your ears should be pricking up, because this is where you all come in. This is where the goals need practical, passionate help. In this room are people who represent all the areas which have to be partners in the goals: politics, business, finance, campaigners, civil society, experts, communicators, innovators, philanthropists, and young people. If each person here can turn on their personal hyperdrive and make their activities support the goals and be supported by the goals, then we can help make a real difference. It's a very deliberate choice, the choice that Bill and Melinda have made by starting this event, for example, really engaging with and using the goals. Do you know what keeps going through my mind, and in a way I wish it didn't?
Is it a song of some sort, Steve?
It is. It's the song by Bette Midler, The Wind Beneath My Wings.
Yeah, there we go. Did you ever know that you're my hero?
And everything I would like to be, yes.
I can fly higher than an eagle.
For you are the wind beneath my wings. We want the goals to be the wind beneath the wings of all the goalkeepers that take our actions to a higher level. I think that's helped. And actually, I take Bette's message quite seriously. The point of the goals is not only to be a plan, but for the existence of that plan to add power, money, legitimacy to all your work.
Yeah, we want you to use the goals as your blueprint, as the prism that you see the future through, the map that you use to get there, and the catalyst that you use to make your time and efforts twice as effective.
And to achieve their epic promise to make us the first generation to end extreme poverty, the last generation to be threatened by climate change, the most determined to end injustice and inequality. It's enough of our words, however, and taking our word for it. We want examples, 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 and they are close at hand. Over here, we have two people who met at the Goalkeepers, and I'm going to come up and speak to them. If I get a microphone, that's wonderful. I want to see, yeah, here we have Nimco Ali, who is a Somalian feminist and who created a survivor-led group called Daughters of Eve, which transforms approaches to ending female genital mutilation. And Brian Kelly, here, from the Point Sky, the wonderful travel site. So I'll start with you, if I may, Brian. How did you two meet, and was it connected with the goals in some way?
Yeah, we actually met. So last year, Nimco Skyped in talking about what she wanted to do, and I had heard Lema Bowie speak last year about, we have to empower female activists, the people on the ground who are actually doing things and want to do things. So I made a commitment last year to donate 5 million of my frequent flyer miles to help activists like Nimco. When she Skyped in, I immediately turned to Becca, who runs charity for me. I said, we need to help her, and the story's pretty incredible.
And And that's terrific news. And how has this helped you, Nimka? What have you been doing since last year?
So yeah, thank you very much. Since last year, so Brian offered the points, and I said I really wanted to go to Somaliland, which is my birth country and has the highest stats of FGM in the world at 98%. And there was an election happening in the October, and I wanted to lobby all three parliamentary presidential candidates in order to pass legislation and to really commit to gender equality. Somaliland is an unrecognized state, but I do really believe putting gender equality at the heart of democracy can really end poverty and all the things that we face. And that legislation has been drafted, is about to pass, and ending FGM by 2030 is a tangible reality and something that we all have a role to play in.
Fantastic. Thank you both very much indeed. Wonderful. And yeah.
So last year I gave 5 million miles. This year I'm going to up it to 10 million miles to help people in this room, other goalkeepers. So if you go to thepointsguy.com/goalkeepers, you can submit. It's not a lengthy process. We trust activists that they're not going to go on spring break in Somaliland, that you're doing amazing work. So we'd love to help even more people this coming year.
That's terrific news. Thank you, Brian. Just to remind you, that's thepointsguy.com/goalkeepers. Now, Richard is going to talk to someone from one of my favourite companies. It's Aviva. They've been transformed since I ever suggested that they change their name by writing it backwards. So it's now Aviva, whereas it used to be Aviva. And I also love them because they support my beloved Norwich City Football Club, which is much in need of a really good goalkeeper, talking of goals. And so the wonderful Steve Waygood. Richard, if you'd like to say hello to him.
Okay, Steve's a friend of mine, but I thought it would just be very interesting also, since we're talking about sort of efficacy, to think about the way that not only activists, but as it were, business works. And Aviva's a really interesting company in those terms. So I think the process is that the company itself has to do things that abide by and are measured by and are in support of the SDGs. I was just talking to Steve. He said they've been carbon neutral since 2004, are working on being plastic free, and invest $1 billion per year in renewables. So that what happens is you get a company like Aviva and they change their behavior, and as a result of changing their behavior, they gain the authority to then take a position and use their muscle. And Steve, I'd love you to tell me about the World Benchmarking Alliance that you're now working on.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess the Norwich City goalkeeper wishes there were only 17 goals that he let in the last year or so. The World Benchmarking Alliance, and thank you very much to Project Everyone for being an ally, will build free public league tables ranking the world's largest 2,000 companies on how they impact on the Sustainable Development Goals. I want to reconnect people to their money. We run money, $500 billion for 33 million people. We cannot show them how their money is impacting their world. I want to. That's why we're building this World Benchmarking Alliance. We've got allies in the room, the UN Foundation and the Index Initiative. We launched it on Monday evening, got 3 governments backing it, the Dutch, the Danish and the British, and over 70 allies. And we're here today inviting everyone to become allies and be part of that movement for change, challenging the 300 trillion in the global capital markets to support the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yes. Now, and I just want to, by the way, this is Keith Weed from Unilever, and he's looking smug because they're going to be very high on all those world benchmarking charts. Thank God there's no one from Gazprom here. Now, the thing that I was going to say, though, is just very quickly, just for 1 minute, will you address the sort of elephant in the room, which is big, new money? Where is the real, have you got, you who deals in money, have you got an idea how we're going to get from the billions into trillions to try and support all the things that the goals need?
Thank you, Richard. I do. The really good news, every single central bank that I've spoken to in the last 2 years, about 2,000 large asset owners and asset managers, and the world's finance regulators have started to talk about sustainability and how they need to regulate finance. Now, I think that should be welcomed. It's too late, but at least it's late. It's not too late to actually challenge and change. But the real change comes not from regulation. The real change comes from all of us who are privileged enough to have money, We need to check that our savings, pensions and investments are actually invested with integrity. We own that 300 trillion collectively, well, the people who are lucky enough to have investments, and I want us to reconnect with it. And so all of us can be part of that movement for change, challenging businesses and calling out the leaders who do well, voting in favour of them when they do well at the AGM, voting against them when they do badly, challenging the Gazproms, welcoming the Unilevers.
Right. So we're going to turn every shareholder into the world into an activist and get access to all our own money to change the world.
And I'm going to speak now to someone from Malawi, who's Memory Banda, who is here. And I'd like to hear your story because this brings us to a subject we haven't yet even mentioned today, but we're going to a little more, and that's child marriage. It's something you know a lot about. Perhaps you'd like to tell your story now.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I've got... You know, I saw the spare seat and thought that was for me. Sorry, Memory.
It's okay. Yeah, okay, so I'm Memory Banda from Malawi. I have been working on ending child marriage, and I started my campaign way back in 2015. So it has been a long journey where I had to be involved in mobilizing my fellow young people to be engaged as young girls to voice out. So we did these campaigns, and we have had ups and downs, not until in 2015 where through an act the legal marriage age was changed. But we still had some contradictions within the constitution where there was no clear definition of who is a child. So we had that process, and last year the constitution was amended, and this has been an incredible journey, and throughout it was us young people leading all these campaigns, and now we have the legal marriage age changed from 15 to 18 without parental consent. So this has been a great move for young girls in my country as far as education is concerned.
That's a brilliant story, absolutely amazing. And firstly, have the global goals helped you with this, and could they help you more?
Absolutely. So it's all about the global goals and how, as activists, as campaigners, we have to work towards accomplishing all these goals that we have. So it takes one step at a time. So as a programmer, through my work, I decided that I saw that there is a very huge gap where you go into the communities, you interact with young people, the adolescents, they really don't know much about the global goals. So I took a bigger challenge where I included in my programming where I talk to young people, we discuss issues about the global goals, and I ask young people, why do you think we have to end poverty? Do you think you can do anything? And why do you think education is so important? What is it as a young person that you can do to make sure that you get educated, young people, young girls get an education? Why do we need to end child marriage? How have you been affected by this, and how do you think that you can help other young girls not to get into a trap of child marriages? So at the end of the day, we need to get our leaders to be committed and to turn their commitments into actions. So we keep on building these chains of young girls who can speak out.
Thank you, Memory Banda from Malawi. And I'm able to offer some good news in this regard in a new accelerator. It's an enormous step forward towards ending child marriage, which, as you know, is a serious problem. And today was always going to be about emotion as well as information. And we have a great surprise for you now, I hope, which is Nicolette Robinson is going to sing Sarah Bareilles' remarkable song, She Used to Be Mine, from the musical Waitress, which she's now starring on, in Broadway in the show. And we've got a film to illustrate the issue of child marriage. And in this film, apart from the school children in the playgrounds and classrooms in the background, every person featured in the film is a child bride. Nicolette Robinson.
It's not simple to say that most days I don't recognize me, that these shoes and this apron had place and its patrons have taken more than I gave them. It's not easy to know that I'm not anything like I used to be, although it's true I was never attention's sweet center, but I still remember that girl. She is imperfect, but she tries. She is good, but she lies. She is hard on herself. She is broken and won't ask for help. She is messy, but she's kind. She is lonely most of the time. She is all of this mixed up and baked in a beautiful pie. She is gone, but she used to be mine. And it's not what I asked for. Sometimes life just slips in through the back door and carves out a person and makes you believe it's all true. And now I got you, and you're not what I asked for. If I'm honest, I know I would give it all back for the chance to start over and rewrite an ending or two for that girl that I knew who was reckless just enough, who gets hurt but who learns how to toughen up when she's bruised and gets used by a man who can't love. And then she'll get stuck and be scared of the life that's inside her, growing stronger each day till it finally reminds her to fight just a little to bring back the fire in her eyes that's been gone, but it used to be mine, used to be mine. She is messy, but she's kind. She is lonely most of the time. She is all of this mixed up and baked in a beautiful pie. She is gone, but she used to be mine.
Nicolette Robinson, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. That was so beautiful. I was so moved by that. After that, it's my honor to announce for the first time here at Goalkeepers a tangible action to end child marriage. As we've already seen today, accelerators are powerful partnerships which catalyze momentum to send issues related to the goals into hyperdrive.
This next accelerator deals directly with the global movement to bring an end to child marriage. It addresses what memory and activists like her know only too well, that unless community-based organizations are funded to end child marriage and support girls and young women, progress will be painfully slow. The new Girls First Fund is the first partnership of its size focused on ending child marriage through granting directly to these community groups, particularly those led by girls and women. This fund will launch in 6 countries in the first year and learn from those who know best how to shift mindsets and social behavior using their expertise in local norms and cultures and drivers of child marriage. And we're talking significant investment here. They have raised $26 million to date. However, the size of the problem we're trying to tackle, this is just the beginning, of course. So if you're a donor in this room, this is your chance to get involved. The team will be in the atrium later in the excitingly titled Accelerator Station, so talk to them to find out more and join this amazing startup. It's a perfect, beautiful example of the macro might of the global goals being used to create and deliver an on-the-ground solution to a truly major issue. And a huge thanks to everyone who's contributed so far. Rather fabulously, there is a representative from each of these donors in the room here today, and we thank you, all of them. Thank you. This is goalkeeping at its finest. So what is the plan then? Well, there's you and there's the SDGs. And what we're saying about the two of you is, firstly, be encouraged. There's goal action happening everywhere. We are not alone. On Sunday, the UN Secretary-General announced amazing new commitments, like, for example, the World Scout movement mobilizing 50 million scouts. Tokyo 2020 is going to commit itself to making the Games, the Olympic Games there, the SDG Olympics. And just yesterday, on the 25th of September, a global day of action for the SDGs took place, bringing together people in every corner of the world to take action. The world's largest lesson kicked off this week, which will get the goals to children in over 120 countries. And the Global Citizen Festival, working for the goals, takes place this Saturday with Janet Jackson, The Weeknd, and my friend John Legend.
And so instruction number 2 is be ready for action today. So what we're really saying to all of you is take advantage of the situation, make connections like Point Sky, like Brian and Nimco, and try to exploit them in the course of the year. And we'll both be around this afternoon for how to actually get things done session. And the point of the goals is they give you authority. In fact, they give you responsibility for making everybody you encounter raise their game. Each day, each month is a critical, urgent, unmissable opportunity to make progress, and today's the first one of those.
And the next headline is Be Ready for Action in 2019, which is a hugely important year. The UN is reporting on the progress of the goals next September. They are the special theme of the General Assembly meeting. So it's important in this year to have some sort of a campaign to remind governments that business, the public, civil society, philanthropists all have the highest expectations, and that stopping halfway to the goals is not an option. We'd love you to join that campaign. And a few people have started having thoughts about that. The big push, for example, make indifference history, show us the money.
Quite keen on show us the money.
Yeah, indeed. It'd be great to feel that in this room are 400 campaign managers.
And then we ask you to be ready for more. It's all action. Be ready for more action in 2020, because that moment in 2019, raising our expectation of government commitments, will, I think, lead to an even fuller campaign in 2020, when we'll try and create something of the same energy and dynamic that there was around the white band Make Poverty History Live 8 moment in 2005. It'll be very different, because we're living in a much more connected and digital world, but we believe that is only a good thing, as we've recently seen around the extraordinary energy created around campaigns to protect the world's ocean, and of course the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement. We really want to start talking about 2020 vision and the idea of seeing the world through the lens of the goals. I thought you might enjoy this little idea we're thinking of doing. Here we go. I hope that we'll have a special booth next year where you can insert your Global Goals contact lens. We'll ask Ed Sheeran to do it, even though he's such an odd color, no one will probably notice. The idea is that people really work out that year the dramatic sea changes and the big funding conclusions, the big funding solutions that can make the SDGs work. And then we'll be ready for the long haul and we'll all work together on that. But the interesting thing, as you get closer to 2030, then the deadlines start to kick in. Politicians start to see the goals are actually going to happen on their watch in the not too distant future. So in a way, these are the difficult years to keep pressing through, and we should take advantage.
Headline, which is "Be optimistic and determined." Many years ago, at a bad time in human history, W.B. Yeats wrote these words: "The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity." And that rings some bells these days, and it's the job of ours to be full of passionate intensity to fulfill the promise of the goals. If I can speak personally just for a second, just as an example of why I so believe that this really is something we can have faith in. I grew up, I'm old as you can tell, so when I knew that I was gay, I thought I would live a life of secrecy and silence and more or less hidden away. It never occurred to me that things could change so quickly. I could now be happily married, and that the world has absolutely transformed itself. In my country, not in all countries of the world, I'm not saying it's all been done, but the speed of that change was inconceivable to me when I was young. Similarly, as someone who's grown up with bipolar disorder, I always thought that as far as my mental health condition was concerned, I would always have to live in shame and secrecy. And that is no longer the case. Things do change. And one of the reasons for that is, I believe, if you throw a brick into a crowd of people, it will fall on the head of a decent person. A person who wants to be good, who wants to do the right thing. And there's all kinds of fear and ignorance that can stop it. But we know that the world can get better. And we know that these levers, these tools that the goals provide will help us. So we can go forward from here, keeping our eyes on the prize, fighting for the top results that will happen if we stay on track. Goalkeepers, and the world will most definitely score the goals. Should we go back to where we began, but slightly louder, with more people shouting the word goal?
I can't imagine anything nicer.
Okay. One of those was scored by Norwich. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks very much.
Amazing, and there's now not a single one of us in this room who isn't a global goals genius, right?
And everything you just heard from Richard and Stephen will come in very handy during this afternoon's session, which will give us tangible, practical, and day-to-day ideas about how you can make these goals actually happen.
But now we are going to take a break so you guys can all catch up with each other, chat right out there. Please be back for 11:45 when Melinda Gates is going to introduce us to some exceptional young people with stories to tell about the barriers they overcame in order to take action. Enjoy your break, talk, share, connect. You can Instagram out there in the atrium also, #Goalkeepers18, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much, Nancy, and thank you, Savannah. You're doing an incredible job. And that was the first session of Goalkeepers 18, and what an incredible event it's been so far. In fact, this is one of our stars that are here right now, and it's so amazing to actually to get to meet you. You've got a lot of role models here. Well, you've become one of our role models, and I'm a big fan of yours.
Thank you.
This is DJ Switch. She's from Ghana. She's only 10 years old, and she's already become quite an established DJ, and she's also passionate about some SDGs. How important do you think education is to you and to your community?
I think education is really important because education helps you In some countries, yes, funds without education, language. So if someone tells you, for example, when you go to school, learn such questions you learned in school, such questions you learned in school, life, because let's say social studies, you learn how to keep the environment clean. When you come to life, someone will ask you how to keep the environment clean. So education is
An incredibly bright 10-year-old, not just an aspiring DJ. You want to be a whole lot more. In fact, you know what? A lot of people I know that are my age don't even know what they want to do, let alone knowing what they want to do at 10 years old. You want to be a gynecologist. Why?
As part of my gynecologist, I want to add details to that. When you come to my hospital, you see my 7 points and you also see the bed. So easy that when you're not getting it, just place it so that the baby will just wants to see what is outside of it.
That's amazing. Right, so what was it like getting to perform today and also getting to stand on stage with the President of France, Emmanuel Macron?
It was so
In fact, if you're wondering why she's the tallest 10-year-old you might have met, she's actually standing on a soapbox. She's not that tall, well, I'm not that short. But it's amazing having you, and hopefully we get to see you a little bit later. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Keep it up. Right, so the next person that we're going to be chatting to is someone who doesn't need an introduction for the great work that he's doing, nor does he need a soapbox or apple box to be able to talk to us. But we're going to be chatting to him a little bit later, so we're just going to have a short break right now, and stay tuned for the live stream. Yeah. Is the mic good? All right, now we're chatting to Sobel Aziz Ngom. Sobel runs the Social Change Factory, which does incredible work across Africa, but mainly in Senegal. You're also Senegal's, or in fact, the youngest fellow for the president, or for Yali by President Obama. Sobel, at that time. Sobel, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Thanks to you for having me here.
You met President Macron earlier today. How was that, and what did you guys chat about?
It was pretty cool, actually. It was fast, but pretty cool. And I take the opportunity to let him know that I'm currently working with his African Council on something very interesting on young people by building bridge between young people from the diaspora living in France and young people in Africa.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. We created a kind of TV show where we put young people in front of their responsibility and actually the different goals that the world have to face. And the idea in France was to create a bridge between young people from the diaspora living in France and young people living in the continent that have common aspiration, transform Africa. And this council of President Macron is a technical arm that could help us to make this bridge exist.
Oh wow, okay, cool. So more great work in the sort of light of Social Change Factory. So what is the Social Change Factory all about for all of those at home who don't know?
Yeah, so Social Change Factory, as you can hear it, it's a factory, virtual and mobile factory, and we position it as a virtual university and mobile. We do a lot of kind of trainings that help young people to be able by themselves to develop and to build up also what is around them by following the main goals that belong to us today.
Well, you speak about following those main goals. Today is all about those goals, keeping to those goals, the global goals, those 17 goals, and you focus across the board. You touch on a few of those goals with the work that you do, not just one or two, but quite a few. So what would you say from today would inspire a person such as you continue to pursue the work that you do, being at an event like Goalkeepers?
I think being at an event like Goalkeepers, it's very interesting to feel yourself as an individual goalkeeper. I never thought like that of what I'm doing. Yes. And here I've met a lot of young and elders, young people that were doing concrete things to get the goals achievable.
As young as 10 years old.
Absolutely, as you just saw. So it's an honor, but the honor is the visible part of it. It's also challenging. It's helping us to see how big the world is and big those challenges are, and the fact that we have to think not only on a programmatic way, but on a systematic way to transform our day-to-day life and our schools and our hospitals and our health systems and all of it. And it's good to see how high this thinking is already put on the table and to be part of it.
Well, mon ami, merci beaucoup, and enjoy the rest of the event. Merci.
Thank you. À bientôt.
À bientôt. That was Sobel, and we're going to actually have DJ Switch coming up so we can chat to him a little bit about her whole motivation behind being a part of the SDGs and, of course, for being a part of the Goalkeepers event. And she's actually right here. We were chatting to her a little bit earlier. We just had a bit of an issue with the mic, but now we can finally talk to her properly. DJ Switch, thank you so much for joining me. I just really wanted to talk to you again, if you don't mind, because you're so amazing. She's only 10 years old. She's from Ghana. She's an established DJ, but she's got some pretty wild dreams for a 10-year-old. That is definitely for sure. How was it performing this morning?
It was so fantastic.
Yeah?
It was fabulous, having all this kind of crowd performing in here. I don't feel nervous in playing music in any capacity of crowd, so that was fabulous.
We actually saw you on stage. You were so confident. You were getting the crowd going nice and early, and you were actually getting them riled up pretty well. This is something that's become quite easy for you now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, education is something that you said that you're very passionate about. So why do you think education is important in your community and spreading that message as much as possible?
I think education is very, very, very important because, without education, you can't do anything. And we have a motto that says, education is the key to success.
Yes.
So without education, you can get success. Without education, you can go to a country and you can do what they do because you're not educated. So I'll say education is very, very, very important.
Now, education is something you're passionate about because, you know, a lot of people when they're 10 years old, in fact, people my age don't even know what they want to do when they grow up. You're only 10 years old and you already know you want to be a gynecologist. Why?
I want to be a gynecologist because I want to help women. You know, women got to support women. So I'll make delivery so easy that when you come to my hospital, I'll set up my DJ set and you see the delivery bed. When you come there and you think your delivery is not that easy, then I'll just go play my music. Then the baby will just be dancing and then the baby will just be wondering what's happening. Then the baby will just come out to see what's
You won't even have to pull the baby out, just gonna walk out.
Yeah.
All right, so how was it meeting President Emmanuel Macron this morning, the president of France?
It was so fantastic because it's not everyone who will get this opportunity. So I would say it was so fantastic.
All right.
And I want to give shout out to the Banks Clothing for this wonderful clothes. I thank you so much. The Banks Clothing is my auntie and also multi-talented like me. She makes, she's a fashion designer and also a cocktail maker. She makes decoration and all that. If you want the Banks Clothing, she's right in Ghana at Kumasi, Asukwa, and you can just contact her.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. She's so well versed in media and also promoting the family business. A very, very smart girl. Thank you so much for your time and good luck for a little bit later. We'll chat to you later. Next up, we're going to be having Jasmine Lau, who is an incredible woman in her own right. She is the CEO and founder of Philanthropy in Motion in China. Jasmine, thank you so much for joining me, and it's such a pleasure to be able to talk to you.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Could you please tell me a little bit more about Philanthropy in Motion, what it's all about and what it plans on doing? Because what you are actually doing is trying to teach the Chinese youth to be intelligent givers. What exactly does that mean?
Sure. Yeah, so I started Philanthropy in Motion in 2013. China doesn't have a huge philanthropic culture. It's a little different from the US. And so what I realized is that there's just so many youths who want to make a difference and want to have their voice heard. So PIM, that's what we call Philanthropy in Motion for short, PIM aims to provide a platform for them. So we do two things. One is education. We run education programs at different schools and universities that engage young people in SDGs. And then we also do funding. So we build the capacity of young people who are starting organizations and making their voices heard on global issues.
Wow. So an event like this, Goalkeepers, it's a second annual event. There are lots of incredible people who are doing phenomenal work, such as you are. What does an event like this mean to you, and how can it actually help accelerate your efforts for the SDGs that you're focused on?
Yeah, so I think it's great to be on a global platform and just really getting to meet people from different parts of the world. I'm really, really inspired by that. Also want to share stories from China. I think today Bill Gates showed that like a significant part of the poverty alleviation efforts is actually done through China's work. And so really kind of sharing the successes and also learning from each other's both successes and failures to see how we can do better.
Fantastic. Is that something that you plan on being able to scale even out of China? I mean, you have billions of people obviously to be to focus on, but is it something that you plan on spreading out to different types of youth, especially in Africa where the majority of the population is youth?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, there's a huge interest in China also to kind of connect with the rest of the world, and especially among young Chinese youth. And so we're thinking about developing more programming that connects people from around the world on similar issues that they're working on. For example, with air pollution, which is something that a lot of youths in China are very passionate about.
Fantastic. Well, for Goalkeepers today, we've already heard from Bill Melinda Gates, President Emmanuel Macron. We've also from Stephen Fry, Richard Curtis, David Senge, and many more. What has been your highlight so far, and what are you still looking forward to from the event?
Yeah, well, everything has been really, really inspiring. I love the optimism and enthusiasm, and kind of like everyone coming together for a global vision. I think that's the most important thing. I think in not sharing about the differences that divide us, but sharing and celebrating the commonalities that unite us.
And then just very quickly, earlier on social media, we asked what people wanted to ask the people I'd be interviewing. And we have a question for you. And they say, you talk a lot about the difference between charity and philanthropy in your work. So what is the difference between them? And how can young people think about giving back?
Yeah, so we like to use a definition of philanthropy like an equation. So for philanthropy, what we look at is time, talent, treasure, kind of money, voice and networks for common good. So it's not just about the money, and it's not just about kind of addressing symptoms of problems. It's really using all the resources. I think Melinda Gates said it's using all the resources at your fingertips to make a difference. So that's what I encourage a lot of young people to do. It's not about just how much money you have. It's what you have to offer to the world.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Jasmine, and we'll touch base with you a little bit later. Thank you very much. That's Jasmine Lau, the CEO and founder of Philanthropy in Motion, and she's just speaking about the fact that it's not only about money if you want to be able to make a difference, it's about also tapping into the resources that you do have. Next up, I'm going to be talking to Max Rosa. Max, how are you?
Very nice to meet you,
Very
Max.
good, man. Nice to meet you. I'm actually a bit of a fan. I love the work that you're doing with Our World Data. You're the CEO of Our World Data. Max, of course, being from Germany. You've done phenomenal work. You're also an economist researching in inclusive and sustainable growth.
Right.
And you deal a lot with graphs and all sorts of data. And you know what? You've made it pretty exciting, but I'd love for you to sort of tell me how you go about making it exciting, because for a lot of people, it seems like something that can be a little bit boring and a bit tough to understand, but it's something that you actually consciously try and make easy for people to consume.
Right, like I think overall, it is actually the fact that that there are many more people interested in data than we usually think. Like we think of it as boring. It's just like, I don't know, a stereotype that we have about data. But once you talk about data, there are a lot more people interested than I would have ever thought, and that many people would think that have that kind of stereotype that statistics are boring. And I think it's just key to talk about data in a way that we really understand what we're speaking about there is the lives of actual people. Yeah. We're actually describing what is happening to the world. People are interested in stories. Our mind, that's what grabs our mind's attention. Yes. And we can tell really important big stories through data, and if you do it well, then there are a lot of people who are interested in it.
Well, on that actually, why is data right now so important, especially for what we're trying to achieve with the Sustainable Development Goals?
Right, I think there's basically two aspects to it. Like, we need data to understand what the challenges in the world are. Is a problem really big? Is that something that we should really focus our attention on? Yeah. Or is it maybe a much smaller problem if we compare it with other problems that we have to fight? And then the second one is to figure out what actually works in making progress. So we can use the data to study which policies are effective, yes, which technologies do make a change. Yes. And then if we aggregate it to the global level, to the national level, then we can see, do these policies and technologies really make a difference at large, so that the world is really changing and the lives of people are actually transforming over the couple of years or decades.
Well, you use that incredibly well in the latest big craze of a book that everyone's talking about, Factfulness. Fantastic book that, of course, was written by Hans Rosling, the late Hans Rosling. What was it like working with him and compiling all that data for that book? Because it's something that has completely shifted the world and how they actually understand the world around them exists.
Right. Like, I mean, we were talking about that just a moment ago. Yeah. Like, Hans really discovered that there are a lot of people really interested in, yes, data, and he was like the big change maker who figured it out how to speak about data in a gripping way, and like talking with working with Hans Rosling was like it was really great. Like, usually you say that it's like advice given that you shouldn't meet your heroes, yes, but working with Hans Rosling was like completely different. Like, he was just the same kind of guy off stage as he was on stage, as many people know him, and I was always impressed by how careful he was in his research, and then how he could condense it to the core message and could really drive home the messages so that people would actually pay attention and care about what's happening in the world.
Max, thank you so much for your time. That's all we have time for. If you're still watching the live stream, in fact, I know you're watching the live stream, there's another session just about to come up. We have more incredible speakers and performers a little bit later. Please keep your comments coming. We want to know more. Hashtag Goalkeepers on Facebook and on Twitter. We want to know what your questions are. I want to ask them to the people that we're interviewing a little bit later. Make sure you don't go anywhere and stay tuned to the live stream.